Hi, I'm Gary and welcome to my shop. In this video I'm going to show you how to use this Lathe Duplicator from PSI. I'll show you how to assemble it and how to use it. As I've got it laid out here, this is all the parts out of the box as it came. I haven't done any assembly yet. This basic part here is the platform upon which everything will work. It's got the guide here and the cutting bit that will go up against your mandrel and your workpiece and make the shapes according to the templates. Then, when I mount this on there, because I've got the Turnkrafter Commander lathe, I'm going to use these 2-inch blocks to raise it up 2 inches here. That'll bring this cutting edge up close to being right in line with my mandrel. Then these parts go underneath the lathe bed rails to secure in. One of these lengths of screws here will go through that. Actually, this will go through a washer, and through here, then through the block, and then this will be underneath the lathe rails. And this comes with instructions. Good reading. Recommend that you do read it through. There's various tips and tricks that you'll need to be aware of as far as putting this together. If you don't read instructions and you get to a point of trouble, then gotta go back and read them. We all seem to do that. Also comes with an instructional DVD, which is very good and useful in teaching you how to use this and some of the assembly parts. I've watched this, I think I got this DVD for free from PSI a couple of years ago, and I've watched it a few times, and that's what convinced me to buy this one. This knob and the wing nut will go on to the back side of this to adjust your depth of cuts. Now this came with a high-speed steel cutter, and additionally I also bought a carbide cutter. Then I also bought these templates for making slimline pins, or 6 templates there. I also bought a set for making chess pieces. I'll try my hand at that, see how that works. And as the instructions will tell you, and as maybe I'll show you, you can make some of your own templates. If you got something that comes out really great and you want to make more exact copies of it, you're going to have to sacrifice the piece and cut it in half and create your own templates out of it. So you might find a machinist nearby once you cut that in half, because your material is probably not going to be real durable to repeated use if it's wood or an acrylic. So you might want to be able to take that piece that you cut in half and have a pattern made by a machinist, if you got one nearby that can do it. And if it's a reasonable price to do it too. So also it comes with a couple of Allen wrenches for putting the bits in, and something else I can't remember off the top of my head, but as we go along I'll show you all these things and we'll see how it goes. So stay tuned and I'll show you how to do this. For assembling this part, before we go to the lathe, it's basically just putting in this cutter tip into this end, get it so it's protruding out a little bit, and that the cutter is sitting level, horizontal, to the workpiece that will be in here. Other than that, it's this knob that goes on here along with the wing nut. I screwed the wing nut on here so that the wings are facing up towards the knob. Then there's a hole, kind of like in the middle of this, that this threads into. What this is the depth adjustment for the cuts. So I'll get that screwed all the way in. And basically that's it. That'll adjust the depth there. So once you're first approaching it, you want it farther out, so you'll have this out, and then as you want your cut to go deeper, you'll move this knob out so you can get a deeper cut. That's about it. Next step is to go and mount it onto the lathe bed, and then I'll show you how to mount up the plates that guide the cutter along for the various shapes. For mounting this board to the lathe bed, you have this threaded rod here in the washer, and you feed it through this block. This particular block, I've got it orientated this way to give me the correct heights that I need to get to. Then there's this threaded adapter down here which will clamp up on the rails on the bottom side of the lathe bed. Now, as you can see here, this is the threaded plate that locks in under the rails of the lathe bed. The rod goes through there, through the block of wood, and into this plate underneath the lathe bed. And then when you tighten it up, it'll grasp that and lock the table in place. Well, as you can see here, it looks like this table is precariously balanced on these blocks attached to the lathe bed, and that extends out quite a ways here. So you'd think that might be a little bit weak, but actually it's fairly strong. We're not really putting much pressure downward on the table here as we're pushing our cutting edge in, so we're kind of like going in this way, putting our pressures that way, sliding along to follow the shape of our template to shape up our pen blanks or bottle stopper blanks or whatever we're trying to duplicate. So pressure is going to be this way, not downward, so this holds up fairly strongly. Now I figured out that I don't want to be putting all these parts together every time I want to set up this jig to use it. Unless you got another lathe that you can leave dedicated to doing something like this. Most of us don't have that in our small shops. So we got to take our jigs on and off quickly and easily, and I like to try and do it in the easiest way, and also I'd like to try and mark things so I can reset it up again without having to do a whole lot of guesswork. What I'm going to do is leave these assembled here, and this will take perhaps a little bit of balancing and finessing, because I got to do is get this table off here far enough, and then I can take the tailstock off, then I can slide the other end off. So I'll try that. Get these loosened up enough. I can slide that off, bring the tailstock off, set that out of the way. Then I can rotate this around and get that part off. Going back on again, it's the same way, getting this to slide on, and then get the tailstock back on again as we put it in between. Put that on, get this back end on, and then getting things lined up so we can get a grip underneath this lathe bed. Okay, got those ends. Tighten this up a little bit just to snug it up and hold it in place while I get everything kind of tightened into place. I'll get the other one by the headstock. Okay, got that one lined up underneath the rails there, so we've got them in place. Loosen this up a little bit, then I'll try and get some adjustments going on here and some settings. So I always try and know where I'm going to go to again when I want to put this back on again. I have the Lathe Duplicator Assembly mounted onto my lathe here, and I've gone through and made some adjustments just to get this set up, see how it goes. And what I'm going to do is kind of demonstrate to you here what we're trying to achieve by aligning this cutting tip here with this point on the drive spur and this point on the tailstock live center. What we need to do is get this point so that it lines vertically with this point and also horizontally with the center at that point. And the same thing at this end, aligning vertically and then horizontally with that point. So the next clip, I'm going to show you an illustration. It kind of shows how I'm trying to lay out these various points that we're trying to set up and how it all ties together. Okay, here I'm going to pop up an illustration on the screen, and it's going to be a little bit small to show on the screen here, but I'll have a link available to the PDF of this, which will be on my website. I'll put that link down in the description below. The top image is a side view of the conical shape, whether it be the drive center point or the live center point on the tailstock, and then this image below that is an end view as if you're looking straight on from the point of that drive or live center. Then I've got three references there. I've got the A is the vertical, the B is the horizontal, and C is the cutting tip. The A, vertical, means moving the cutting tip up and down to align with the point that we're aligning with. B is the horizontal, so that we're aligned at both ends, at the headstock and at the tailstock, so we're in alignment at both ends. C is representing the cutting tip and how we're trying to get that in alignment with those two centers on the headstock and the tailstock. Okay, at the lathe here, we're going to set these vertical adjustments and the horizontal adjustments, basically going in and out. So they line up with the tips on this headstock, drive spur, and the tip of the tailstock live center. I want them both to line up both vertically and horizontally to the very point of these 2 points. First step is like, which one do you adjust first, the vertical or the horizontal? It's kind of like the chicken or the egg. I decided to adjust the vertical point to get that one set first, and adjust that. It's a matter of raising this white piece here and these screws that are in here, 4 screws, to get this leveled up. Now what I did is loosened up all 4 screws, brought my piece over. I've got this forward so I can get to that point. Had my table adjusted because I need to get close to that point so I can see what I'm doing. And what I did was adjusted these ends up, tightened down one end first when I thought it was good, went to the other side, brought that one up and tightened down that screw. Then you have to go back and forth and recheck, because as you change this, you're kind of changing alignment at the other end. So you have to keep going back and forth until you got good alignment on both ends. Then, as far as the horizontal adjustment in and out to get on center with these points, it's loosening up these knobs on the table here that secure it to the lathe bed, and then sliding this whole assembly basically in and out until the cutting tip lines up with these points again, in that way. Then as you do that, you need to go back again and check your vertical adjustments. So you kind of keep going back and forth on these adjustments until you get it all right. You maybe have to go back and forth 2 or 3 times. Then you should have it pretty well set. Once you got this height bar set, that should be good, and you shouldn't have to mess with it too much. Unless you change cutting tips, you may have to adjust some of these adjustments all over again, like if you put on a carbide cutting tip. So that's pretty much it for setting that up. And next I'll show you how to put the templates into here so we can have something to follow to do the cut. So I'm preparing here to put this template into this duplicator. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to take the follower pen and lightly sand that on some sandpaper. I'm using some 220 grit here. Just to remove any burrs that may be on there so we can get this to follow the pattern smoothly and not hang up on any points. And the same for the pattern here too. This is a pen pattern, and it comes stamped out of metal, I'm sure, and it's got some kind of rough edges on here as it comes. So I take some 220 grit sandpaper and just go over that a little bit, smooth it up to get any rough edges off, any burrs, anything that will make the follower pen hang up. We don't want that to kind of get stuck as we're trying to go through there. So a little bit of sanding, that makes it pretty smooth, using some 220 grit sandpaper. Then we'll get that mounted into this guide. Okay, on this point here for guiding the cutter along, I'm going to put this guide pin back into here. Had it out for doing the other adjustments. Get it in there fairly far and then line it up so the guide pin is pointing very vertically. I'll snug this down, this thumb screw. Tighten down this thumb screw to hold that pin in place. Use this handy dandy little tool I made for tightening that just a little bit. Just snugging it, doesn't have to be real tight. Then I'm ready to put in the template into this. I'm going to show you something on that. Now if you can see, there is a spot here where this clamp comes out, then it goes down a little bit like a leg and then back out again. And this is where the template fits in, and that little leg stops it from going back too far. So that's your depth of what your template can be, so you don't have to worry about setting that all the time. This is not actually the location the template's going to be. It's going to be much further down here, lining up with the workpiece we're going to work with, but at least wanted to illustrate how this clamps onto your template. Okay, so I made adjustments to get my cutting tip so it's right up close to the bushings here without touching them. So I got that, and then I set that on all 3 of these. There's a scratch on there because of my testing and setting it. And then the last one here, as long as it can spin without touching the cutting tip, I've got good level there. So this is where I had to adjust my horizontal again using these knobs on the table, moving this whole table back and forth. And as you do, just one end and the other, you kind of kiltering it off, so you have to go back and forth and keep readjusting until you've got it pretty well set on. Another thing that I did is I'd extend this cutting tip a little further out of the body of this in order to get a reach inside of there so I can do this testing and setup. When trying to align these templates here with your work stock, it's difficult to get a straight edge in here to line up and be able to see where you're at on the template. That's because of these parts here that are protruding out after using a barrel trimming tool. It gets your brass tubes square to the workpiece, but it leaves these things in the way here, so we can't get a square across here and make sure that our template is correctly located. So what I'm going to do is go to my oscillating sander, which has a belt sander on it, and flatten off these ends here so I can get a straight measurement across there. On my rigid sander here, I have my table, and I've got this board that I made that's squared up to this belt sander. So what I'll do is put my edges on here, and I can square up the ends on these so they'll be flat, and I can get good alignment back over in the Lathe Duplicator. Okay, now back at the Lathe Duplicator, I can get my ruler on here and lay it flat and compare it to the points here on the template where I want to match up with these bushings here and those gaps. So I can lay that flat in there, extend it out, and get your eyeball in there, and you can see that you're lining up with it. Same with all the ends here. Make sure everything is lining up correctly with those minimum flats there, which are representative of where the bushings are, and that's the bottom point where you're not going to rub into the bushings based on the settings we've got set so it doesn't cut too deeply. So that's all set up now just by squaring off these ends on my oscillating sander so I can get a good check and make sure I'm in the correct measurement. Okay, I'm getting down to the point where we're going to start doing some cutting. And what I do is I set up my cutter guide here so that this knob here sets my depth of cut. This wing nut here locks this knob in place so it doesn't rattle and change my depths on me while the lathe is running. So I've got this set so it stops at about this largest point on my template here. So I'll be using this initially to get this to a round, and then as I get to this point here, and if it's not cutting any further, then I will adjust this, turn this knob out, and that'll allow it to cut in further and deeper. Okay, we're going to get down to doing some cutting here with this. Basically, I'm going to start out by getting this to a round cylindrical shape. Then as I hit the stops on my template here, I'll set my depths for a deeper cut and then keep going until I've got everything cut down to the shape of the template. Now, I'll probably cut in and out a few shots here so I don't bore you with this long, tedious process, but just enough here so you get the gist of the idea of what we're doing. Now I'm going to loosen this up, loosen the strut a little bit so I can get a deeper cut. Deepen this a little bit more. As I'm doing this, I want to make sure I'm keeping downward pressure on this so that it's not going up and down and changing my distance. Turning this knob about a half rotation at a time. Starting to get close to the first high point on the template. So this is giving me my first high points on the template there. Yeah, that's pretty much it there for this particular pen, this shape. on this template. It's a bit rough because it's kind of a pointed there, so it's not giving you as smooth of a cut, but we'll clean that up with some sandpaper next. Okay, next I'm going to do some sanding. I can just leave it in place here like it is. I'll go through all the grits from the 150 down to 600. Put my RPMs low. Okay, that'll clean that up pretty well. Okay, so I've got this sanded down to 600 grit, pretty fine. Next I'll start finishing it. Go over with some fine steel wool first. I like to wipe it off with a cloth. Okay, I did some ultrafine sanding with this Tripoli Ultra Shine. It does a really fine grit for getting this really smooth. So next I'm going to be putting on some Aussie oil for a final finish on this. Now for the Aussie oil finish, put a few drops on a paper towel or a cloth, and I turn on the lathe, about 3,000 RPM. Put this on in about 1 minute. And I'll do about 4 or 5 coats of this. Okay, see how it's coming out really shiny. Be a hard finish. And I'll do another 4 coats on this, then I'll show you how it looks like in the end. So here I have a really nice finished pen, shaped to the shape of the template, and I got it super smooth with this Tripoli Ultra Shine, and then I finish coated it with the Aussie oil, which gives it a really hard and a glossy finish, and that'll be durable for pens and stuff that are handled on a daily basis. Recommend a good hard finish, such as this Aussie oil or a CA glue finish. So I will take this apart and assemble the pen and show you how that looks. Okay, so I've completed this pen shaped to the shape of the template, and this one I did. It's a beautiful walnut. Looks great, very fine finish and shiny. Gonna last a lot of years. So this is how we duplicate shapes that we want to keep repeating over and over again. You can do this with pens, slimline pens, bottle stoppers, utensil handles, pizza cutters, ice cream scoops, ornaments, egoscopes, and keychain fobs that you can shape to the various shapes that you want and repeat them over and over again. Easy way to replicate things and keep a uniform shape. Well, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and you got the inspiration to make something. If you did, please give me a like and share it with your family, friends, and fellow craftspersons. Also, if you want to see what I may come up with again in the future, please subscribe. And remember, if the women don't find you handsome, at least they should find you handy. Thank you.